Hey everybody, it's David Sirota. So is Bernie Sanders running for president in 2020? And that's a big question. A lot of people have been asking it. I don't think there's a good definitive answer on that. But one thing there is a definitive answer on is Bernie Sanders making moves that could help him in 2020? I think the answer is certainly yes. First and foremost, he's been pushing Medicare for all. He's been a big leader on that. It's a very popular idea certainly among Democratic primary voters, according to polls. So that has been a move that I think certainly on progressive policy, it's very progressive, but also politically, it's a very politically shrewd move for him if he were to run in 2020. He's also making some important political decisions that could help him in 2020. You may have noticed that Sanders and his political organization, Our Revolution, have been particularly active in a couple of key races in states and cities where Sanders would need to do particularly well in 2020 and where he didn't necessarily do so well in 2016. There were these local and one state race where Sanders and his organization have been very, very active in. They were very active in the Jackson, Mississippi mayoral races. Sanders, they were supportive of Chokwe Lumumba, who won that race, a very progressive mayor, saying he's going to put in place very progressive policies in that city in Mississippi. Sanders and his organization backed Randall Woodfin, who ran for mayor and won a big race for mayor in Birmingham. Woodfin, by the way, did not endorse Bernie in the 2016 election, but Bernie and his organization have been helping Woodfin, and now he is on his way to being the mayor of Birmingham. You had Bernie has been very active in the Atlanta mayor's race, backing a lawmaker there named Vincent Fort in that race. And Sanders has been supportive of former NAACP chairman Ben Jealous, who's running for governor of Maryland. Now, Sanders underperformed in a pretty serious way in African American communities, in particular in the South. And so those mayor's races could help him if he was going to run in 2020, and if those candidates win, those could be helpful. Those leaders in those cities could be helpful in him building a new political infrastructure for a 2020 presidential campaign, one that he didn't have in 2016. And in those states, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, he got crushed in 2016, and that underperformance was a huge part of the delegate deficit that he ultimately faced at the end of the race, and ultimately in part why he didn't win the Democratic nomination. He lost Maryland also. So what I'm saying here is not that Sanders is backing candidates who aren't progressive in order to help himself. No, what I'm saying is that these are very progressive candidates, and that Sanders and his political organization could pick a million different races to be involved in, but they've picked these specific races with these very progressive candidates that could have an additional benefit, a political benefit to Sanders if he should run in 2020, because in helping these candidates, by the way, win or lose, but certainly if they win, in helping them, he is building bridges to communities and to these places where he would need to do a whole lot better in order to win the Democratic nomination. Now you may be saying, well, Alabama, I don't get it, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, these are not states that are usually contested in the general election, and that's true. But they are hugely important in the Democratic primary. I mean, they have a lot of delegates in that primary. And so when Sanders underperformed in 2016 in these states, it was a huge problem for his campaign, one that they ultimately couldn't surmount in terms of delegate counts. So if Sanders is running, these moves would certainly appear to be moves that could help him address that weakness that he had in 2016 and turn it into a strength by having more political support, more community support in these places if he were to run again in 2020. That's a big if. We don't know if he's going to run again in 2020, but if he does, these moves seemed well designed to address some of those big weaknesses that he had in 2016.